The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield with support services designed to help seniors age in place, including a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. More at armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. Good morning. It's Friday, December 5th, 2025. Our rundowners this week: Mary Jane Williams, reporter for the Berkshire Eagle; Eric Lesser, senior counsel for Wilmer Hale; Springfield Republican newspaper reporter April May Munford; and NEPM newsroom reporter Jill Kaufman.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
If you at home have something to say, email therundown@nepm.org. This week, obviously, we saw our first big snowstorm of the season, followed by now what is an extreme cold snap. Warming centers are open and available in many cities and towns. Coming up later in the show, Governor Maura Healey's administration's framework for new high school graduation requirements. Not everybody's loving that. Details on the sheriff's budget deficits across Massachusetts, what's unique about how those budgets are funded, and whether that process will change given current legislative pushback. And the city of Pittsfield will look at the improvements that they're proposing to their wastewater treatment plant, again, just a few years after they renovated that. But first, two fires in Holyoke that displaced about 100 families. The community has rallied to help. There were 3 buildings in downtown Holyoke that were impacted by these devastating fires over the course of 2 days, as I said, leaving about 100 families displaced. April, you've been covering these stories all week. What's top of mind for you right now?
What's top of mind for me is that people do not know where they're going to go. Once the aid runs out, the hotel stays, they have to pay for them some kind of way. Families are left with nothing and scrambling to make something happen. Not everybody has a family member to go to. And we spoke to one mother who needs more help. She doesn't know where she's going to go. She started a GoFundMe. Her name is Teresa. And she since has $1,300 in the GoFundMe. She had 2 days of support, but still was scrambling to figure out where she's going to go next.
I think in the aftermath, the city was pretty quick to help people temporarily find the housing that they needed, as you pointed out, but the challenge, and this is a challenge before fires strike, right? We have a shortage of housing in Western Massachusetts.
Right. So in speaking with City Council President Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti yesterday, she did praise a lot of landlords who came out of neighboring cities as well, who came up and set up at the War Memorial, and Wayfinders was there. So people like Teresa and other people, they were able to apply for raft assistance and then apply for these apartments that lots of landlords were saying, hey, I have a few units available. What can I do? How can I help?
And the War Memorial is a temporary space that they're using sort of as a disaster relief shelter in the aftermath. Jill, you also reported on this. What's top of mind for you?
Sure. I did not get to speak with any families, but I do know that there are several GoFundMes going. So the city initially, in its efforts with the Red Cross and with other service organizations, said, please donate money so that there is a fund for hotels, for instance. So hotel stays are going to be limited, as you said, April. They're definitely, that money, however much came in, will run out. I also heard that landlords were coming forward. There was also something that I learned from the fire that was in Amherst that displaced mostly UMass students, is that
we talked about that last month on the show. It was a huge fire,
yes.
200 people displaced there.
Yeah, 232 even. And a couple of people were not students. But there is state law in Massachusetts. This is a little bit of money that I'm looking at Eric Lesser. That landlords are in their own insurance, they are to give, in the case of displacement as such, they give each tenant $750. It is not a lot of money, but it is some money. Is that the correct, if you remember?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And that is per unit, not per person. So we talk about number of families being displaced, or number of individuals, though, is like upward 150. There still weren't approximate numbers. Yesterday, is that the case that you know about as well, April? You've been on this in a different way.
Yeah, so right now, there's about 70 families that were displaced, 70 families displaced. About 45 units, they said, were unoccupiable.
And some people have been able to get back inside and get some belongings,
Right.
but some of the units were a complete and total loss.
Right, not just fire loss, but waterlogged as well.
Yes. And so now, what are officials saying about suspected cause? Is there any foul play suspected?
No foul play. No one was injured, which is really incredible. So the first one is believed to be started maybe by a space heater. Cause are still under investigation, but it could be a space heater that was plugged into a power strip. So officials are urging people who are using space heaters to do so carefully and plug them directly into the wall source and not into power strips.
Because that heats up, they heat up, right? Those strips. I've experienced this. That even the cord itself on a space heater. So if you leave it on for the whole day, that kind of thing can happen.
Yeah. I've seen people in GoFundMe saying that they had issues with heat in the building. Now that'd be interesting to see. As far as we do know, the sprinklers were working fine, and everybody was able to get out safely.
Yeah, and also fascinating there, or fantastic there, I should say, that no one was injured. They were able to get also some pets out, although some pets were lost. Eric Lesser, any thoughts for you on this?
Well, first it's a tragedy, especially during the holidays. It is so cold out. Which also adds to the just the humanity of this and how important it is to make sure people have safe housing. I do want to give a real shout out to the city officials and especially the fire department that really did great work in tough conditions, and the community groups that have stepped up to provide support. After the immediate crisis is addressed and people are given the help that they need, we do need to always take a step back when something like this happens and ask what can be improved from a systems point of view. Were the building codes appropriately being enforced? What can we do around public awareness, for example, around the heaters? These are very old buildings in many cases that require a lot of maintenance and preventive catch-up work. So there's going to be some questions there about what can be improved to make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
Mary Jane Williams.
I also wanted to bring up, especially when it comes to the space heaters, it's one of the most major causes of house fires, so it's something we really need to be looking out for. And on my drive down here, I actually heard that there was a fire in Pittsfield this morning, a massive fire that broke out on Route 20 near their Wagon Wheel Motel. So I guess it's just as tragic as this is, it really serves as a reminder to watch out for those space heaters, watch out for what you are plugging in and where you're plugging it in this winter.
Absolutely. And obviously this is an ongoing... Oh, go ahead, Pray.
One thing that breaks my heart is that Holyoke is trying to revitalize this area.
Right.
They're also trying to bring in more apartments, and then they just lost all these apartments.
Yeah.
So that's a concern as well.
A challenge we saw in Amherst, too. All right, well, a story we'll keep following here. I'm going to move us on. Headline, Healy outlines framework for new high school graduation requirements, including end-of-course tests, capstone projects. That was the headline on a story by Katie Lannon from GBH News. And she went on to say Massachusetts high schoolers would be required to learn financial literacy, start planning their college or career journeys, take end-of-course tests, and complete a capstone or portfolio project under a new set of graduation standards that state officials proposed Monday. The initial framework comes in response to a statewide vote last year that eliminated the use of 10th grade MCAS tests as a graduation requirement. We saw voters handily defeat that. Healy administration officials worked with a council that included educators, students, parents, and business community representatives to come up with the newly proposed requirements unveiled on Monday. Eric Lesser, state education was a huge part of what you kept tabs on when you were in the state Senate. What do you think about this framework?
So, just backing up a second, all of this is about the fallout from the MCAS ballot question last year. Just for a touch more context, so I'm 40 years old, and I was part of the first Massachusetts high school class.
Me too.
Probably, yeah, we remember that. I remember the little juice boxes they gave us to try to juice the scores.
We were the testing group.
Yeah, exactly. So, for a generation now in Massachusetts, you had this high stakes test. It was a graduation requirement in 10th grade. There had been fits and starts, efforts at the legislature to try to reform it, change it. The MTA had long been opposed to mandate or to
That's
requiring.
the Massachusetts Teachers Association.
Exactly. So there had long been an effort to try to undo that high stakes graduation requirement, testing requirement. It finally was undone by ballot referendum last year. And the question then became, now that you don't have this graduation requirement of the MCAS, what would the graduation requirement be to get a diploma in Massachusetts? The MTA's position has been that it should be up to individual districts to decide, their school committees and their superintendents, and to decide what that individual district's graduation requirement has been. But the governor, of course, has been under some pressure, especially from the business community, to determine a new framework and a new standard for a diploma across the state. So a commission, of course, was set up. The commission took a year to discuss this,
and they're still not done. And the final report will be released next year later this year. Rather.
It's a little trick.
2026.
It's always a little trick. You do an interim report so that you can change it based on feedback. But so the interim report that came out now envisions a series of metrics tests by course, and then what they're describing as a capstone project. This didn't satisfy the MTA. They were very vocal in opposing this, basically saying you're replacing one high stakes test with another. We'll see how this shakes out, but
we saw business leaders saying that they've been calling for this for a while, saying they want students to have more practical skills in place ahead of this. Jill, you've reported on education for a long time now, as I have, as a Prel too. What do you make of this framework?
I want to break this. Actually, I want to get every single one of that commission into the room because I want to break this down, and also the districts, everybody, because you have districts needing to report to the states their competency determinations of students while they are writing these, and they are due at the end of this month. They don't have a final understanding from the state what that framework will be. So it's not that they are putting the cart before the horse, because they are working, districts are working with the state, they're working with each other as well to reflect on, the basics. These are not a surprise of what those requirements are going to be. How they will be assessed is the big question mark. Is this right? So I didn't hear standardized test anywhere. I heard exams that'll be course-based. So I don't have this image, and please jump in here and correct me, that there is going to be a large room or even a small room where people are sitting with their juice boxes taking a statewide written exam. It could be state written, but I get a sense that it's a different type of exam. Plus, there is the possibility of portfolio assessment and other kinds of assessment. So what do you understand about whether this, the proposed framework includes a standardized exam?
I think the idea, at least as it's been described so far, and again, it's a moving target, is that this would more resemble like the test you take at the end of a course, right? So it would be competency based on individual courses, and you would be assessed on the breadth of those, multiple tests, rather than the old MCAS model, which was all the 10th graders, piled into a room and took one test, and that was it, pass, fail.
The interesting thing for me that I'm watching, well, many interesting things, but one in particular, the MCAS aren't going away. They're just not going to be required to graduate. So if you have these individualized tests based on different subjects that are going to be coming, that will be the requirement, and you're still taking the MCAS, to me it's like tests on top of tests, potentially.
It is a federal requirement, the MCAS.
Well, as of right now, the legislature can step in and manipulate how the law works, and that remains
if we have an education department, actually.
Right.
Details.
That part.
Yeah.
I think that we have to understand that students are looking for relevancy. Right. The MCAS felt very irrelevant to where, as a student, I was going to go with my life. And so maybe if we're replacing these tests that don't reflect what students are thinking or where they want to be, then maybe the test won't be as high stakes. But what other tests do students have to take during the year? How many tests, and are teachers teaching to that test? Because that's the main concern with teachers, that they feel like they're spending so much time teaching to the test. However, I did speak to several parents who are like, how are we going to know if the school's teaching our kids?
Right. Right.
So those are all questions that we still have to figure out.
I feel like there's so many more questions. We could spend an entire hour on this. Mary Jane Williams, I just want to say for you, you came from Connecticut.
Yes.
I think around the table, you are the most recent high school graduate.
Yes.
What happened in Connecticut for you when you're looking at these compared to how Massachusetts is handling this?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2021, so it was actually mid-COVID, but for us, what we had to do was we had to present a portfolio, we had to do a formal business interview, and that was about it. For the portfolio, we would put together our best pieces and sort of use it as a way to demonstrate what we've learned over the years. And we could really show off our best work. And then when it came to business preparation and making sure we were ready for the real world, that's sort of where the formal interviews stepped in. And of course, as we mentioned, it's required that, of course, we took standardized tests as well, which, Connecticut performs pretty well on overall, but that was never a requirement for us to graduate.
Interesting to see how another state handles this. All right, so final recommendations on this framework as it's proposed are due in June. That was the date that I was grappling for before, so more information to come. We are going to take a quick break here, but still ahead, how public money is used by and why costs are keep rising for county sheriffs. And will the city of Pittsfield spend more money on its wastewater treatment plant 3 years after it dropped $70 million? We'll talk about that and more coming back here on The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo, joined by journalists Mary Jane Williams, April May Munford, and Jill Kaufman, as well as former state senator Eric Lesser. All right, on now to some investigative reporting by Greta Yoakum of the Springfield Republican. She took a detailed look at sheriff's budgets. The headline, Sheriff's $100 million headache. Blank checks could be over as lawmakers question funding systems. Greta went on to say that, quote, Massachusetts sheriffs asked for more than $100 million in August to cover spending beyond their budgets. Legislators balked. Yoakum went on to say that legislators voted to withhold most of the requested supplemental funding to sheriffs pending an investigation by the Inspector General. The governor signed the bill on Tuesday. The debate reveals an obscure funding system that has allowed the state's 14 sheriff's departments to routinely spend more than budgeted. Senate leaders called this year's request, quote, an abnormally high spending deficit. Sheriffs, on the other hand, say that the money is needed to plug their deficits, and it's close to what they projected they would be spending when they initially proposed their budgets. They fault a legislative system that routinely gives them less than they need. All right, I feel like we could also spend an entire show on this one. Quick reaction from you, Jill Kaufman.
Well, I think about towns and their budgets. I think about other branches of government and their budgets. I don't know enough about, and keep looking at you, Eric Lesser, as former Beacon Hill lawmaker. I don't know enough about the state budget overall, but it is stunning that this is a way to operate. But it is the way that government does operate. You need more money there. That's why there are supplemental budgets and all that. It sounds like a lot of money. Law enforcement is as important as many other things. I guess heartened could be the word. I respect the fact that the Sheriff's Commission or the Sheriff's overall, the statewide sheriff organization says our books are open. Come check this out. And of course, maintaining, as Greta reported, that they are underfunded to begin with. But it is a lot of money. So
there's so much detail in Greta's reporting. If you haven't yet read it, check out the Springfield Republicans. It's Mass Live, which you can get the story there from the Springfield Republican. It was in Sunday's edition. But part of what she said is that of all of the sheriff's departments, Hampden County overspent its budget the most. There was a $26 million deficit on its $102 million state allocation. Its services include the men's and women's jails, as well as lots of other programs for reentry and for substance abuse treatment or avoiding substance abuse. And so I think people think about sheriff's offices and they think about incarcerated individuals, period, end of story. But it's a much bigger operation. And one of the things the sheriff's department pointed out was that they're providing some regional services too for Section 35 folks who have been involuntarily committed temporarily, and also they provide the only women's prison. Eric Lesser, you were in the legislature and you saw this push-pull between, sheriffs, what they are allocated, and coming back at the end of the year. The gap wasn't as big when you were there. What do you make of this?
It was a chronic issue, though, and just for a touch of context for people, so the state budget is set, the fiscal year begins July 1, and every agency is given their allocation. But as Jill pointed out, it is routine for supplemental budgets to be passed off-cycle, so off of that July 1 fiscal year calendar, and it's snow removal, collective bargaining agreements, just like in your household.
It's a very narrow window of things that are allowed to deficit spend.
There's a very narrow window of things that are allowed to deficit spend, but it is pretty common for agencies to come back for supplemental appropriations and for the supplemental budget process to kind of fix and smooth out the edges. But there's no doubt that there's been a chronic issue with the sheriffs. Part of the reason, and I think you got to the crux of it, Carrie, is that over the last several years, the sheriffs have been asked to do a lot more than what arguably was their historic core mission, which was corrections, right? Hampden County is probably the best example of this. They run one of the premier, substance abuse, treatment programs in the state. They run a lot of regional prevention programs. They've really become, arguably social service agencies and human service agencies in addition to law enforcement agencies. Now, we can debate whether that is correct or not, but they are doing the work.
And there is a huge ongoing debate about that, for sure.
But there is a huge need, and they are filling it, and that comes at a cost.
And I think that maybe we could see with the jail populations declining, right? So maybe this work is helping people not
end up incarcerated.
recidivism,
Yeah,
right?
End up incarcerated.
And the census
because we
in the
do
jail
have
is going down.
Yes.
In part, the sheriffs would say because, as our Paul just pointed out, because of these programs.
And while you're talking about Hampden County, Franklin County became, I think, like the first in the state, the jail in Greenfield, to offer Suboxone, maybe methadone, for addressing the opioid crisis, because that is where people are landing if they are arrested on charges related to that. So if the opioid crisis has bumped up services, but there is less recidivism, I mean, there is something going on to look at more closely.
Well,
And
go ahead. Very
and
quickly.
I do think that the number one thing that people who are incarcerated want is programs. They always say we need programs.
I'm going to move us on to reporting by Mary Jane Williams, but quickly just saying that the IG investigation draft report is due at the end of February 2026, and a final is expected at the end of May, so certainly to be continued on this story. Headline on Mary Jane Williams reporting out of the Berkshire Eagle: Pittsfield seeks $15.2 million to upgrade aging wastewater treatment plant amid safety concerns. A touch of your reporting here, quoting, Pittsfield's wastewater treatment plant is poised for a major upgrade as city officials push for a new laboratory and administrative building, citing years of structural problems and growing safety concerns. The Department of Public Works is requesting to borrow up to $15.2 million. Mary Jane, Pittsfield just spent $70 million in 3 years sort of upgrading its wastewater treatment plant. They capped that off in 2023. Why do they need to drop another $15 million?
Yeah, so basically this building has long been considered inadequate, but it was actually left out of the $70 million upgrade in 2019 just because of costs. They already had so much to fix up. But when it comes down to it, this building, it does objectively need to be fixed. It suffers from mold, pests, poor ventilation. They don't have a working ventilation system, failing equipment, inadequate electrical capacity, no fire protection. And keep in mind, this is a lab. They are testing things. They are mixing chemicals, and just the overall conditions are
It was
inadequate.
Shocking to me
Yes.
to hear that some chemicals that they're mixing, because of the lack of the inadequate ventilation, they step outside to mix those chemicals.
Yeah,
I
so
think
they're
it's
getting in full gear to do this. They're mixing these chemicals, and it can't be raining, and it cannot be under 65 degrees in order to mix these. So
Really challenging.
You
Go
know, I
ahead,
thought
Fran.
we had a really difficult work setting, but
I think this just highlights all the money that we received for infrastructure during ARPA. We still need more.
That was
Right.
money released from the feds during COVID. And, the initial upgrade was controversial, which is part of the reason that Pittsfield kicked the can on it. So right now, this is before City Council. What's the reaction so far?
So far, the reaction is not as intense as the 2019 initial upgrade, and that is also because Pittsfield has changed the way that it calculates sewer and water rates. So previously, when they did this large upgrade, sewer rates actually increased for residents by 50%.
It was a very steep incline.
A very,
increase.
very steep one. So I feel like when people saw this initial headline, they immediately were thinking, oh, wow, all my bills are going to be raised. But when it comes down to it, they came up with this new formula that combines the consumer price index factor and the operational stability factor. So basically what needs to be done in the city over the next few years. But that operational stability factor is capped at 10% to prevent any of these excessive increases. So overall, this is going to probably increase rates, very slightly, but this new formula prevents any major increases at once.
I'm just curious if you know, and also I just want to make sure that it was clear that what my joke is about rain and temperature, not about the serious matter of situation going on there. But do you know, before this rate hike, when the last time there was a rate hike? Because I think about Springfield and I think about where, I live in Hampshire County, like the water rates are relatively low. The rate is going up as compared to other utilities. So what was I'm sorry to take over your job, Carrie. What was the last rate hike as compared?
The last rate hike was this year. They slightly went up. I don't remember the exact figure off the top of my head, but they did slightly raise using this new formula, which of course city councilors were not necessarily pleased by, but they recognized that it was the baseline amount that these utilities needed to be raised in order to raise enough money for the city.
Well, the next steps in this, the City Council is going to authorize the funding potentially, and if that happens, the project would go back out to bid this winter, according to your reporting, and construction targeted for 2026. I think it just, this is a zoom in on infrastructure problems that we're seeing across Western Massachusetts.
Constantly,
and
yes.
challenges that are not unique only to Pittsfield. All right, heading into our scoop, praised, and prediction portion of the show, where I ask the panel to make a prediction about the news. Perhaps the reporters dish on a story they're working on, or even heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget. Eric Lesser, scoop, praise, prediction. What's on your mind?
I'll do two pieces of praise. So
Nice.
first, we opened the show talking about the fires in Holyoke, and I just want to lift up everybody that worked on the response to that tragedy. In particular, I want to give a shout out to Jeff Trask, who is the head of Holyoke Emergency Management, and really stepped up, did an amazing job. Just kind of an uncelebrated public servant who just want to lift up. And then a big shout out to the Springfield Public Forum. They hosted Fareed Zakaria on Monday. I was the moderator, so I'm not dispassionate here. Did a great job, great event. But it was great to have.
all around.
It was great to have so many people in downtown Springfield, and the Public Forum does such a great
They
job, and they bring so many great speakers. So I just want to lift up their work.
Absolutely. Mary Jane Williams, for you, what's on your mind?
I also want to do a similar praise really quick to all of the warming centers, library staff, volunteers, nonprofits, and just those with large hearts this week who jumped into action during this first real cold snap. And then in terms of a scoop, I've noticed this resurgence of gaming stores, even as small businesses are suffering amid a tight economy. Like there was an arcade that just opened in Pittsfield, as well as a trading card shop. So that was something that really intrigued me.
Pearl May Munford.
Something sizzling for today. There is a grand opening for the first Japanese barbecue restaurant in Holyoke today. It's at 4 p.m. I'm going to be there along with the photographer, 241 Whiting Farms Road in Holyoke.
Jill Kaufman, very briefly.
Just keep an eye on the social media regarding the Holyoke fires, because it's hearkening back to another era. It's not accurate, and you can see the city government pushing back on that as well. So
All
that's
right,
interesting.
my thanks to this morning's panel, Jill Kaufman, April May Munford, Mary Jane Williams, and former State Senator Eric Lesser. I'm Carrie Saldo. You have been listening to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. Have a great Friday.
Okay, bye.